Hi everybody, Rustin West Ham Network. Hope you are all safe and well. If not a bit deflated from the transfer window, as always happens with us, as always happens. If you're new in here, be lovely to subscribe. Thank you. And if you're there, give it a cheeky like or unless give it a comment as well. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss any content as well. We've got loads of stuff coming up this week in preparation for the Newcastle game. Why I put is Newcastle. So yes, that'll be fun. But obviously yesterday we had the news that we lost two of our youth team prospects, of our under 23, under 21s, whatever it is now, academy prospects. Obviously the protracted transfer of Ashby to Newcastle United, that was confirmed, just over £3 million for him. And I totally understand his reasonings behind it. You know, his pathway to the first team is probably shorter now. In terms of just Trippier in front of him, although Kieran Trippier did sign a 1-year extension to his contract last week, I believe. So I understand that. And also then we had the bizarre news yesterday, last night, despite the fact he was playing, it came out that Longelo was making his loan deal permanent to Birmingham for £400,000, which surprised me a little bit because he'd been dropped recently because his performances weren't up to par, but they've decided to make his deal permanent. And it got me thinking, because then we all start talking, don't we? We all start talking, and we were talking on the stream about, you know, the youth team, and I know it's a hot topic. Tommy did a great show about it last week, and I thought I'd give my opinion a little bit, to be honest, because I think it's something which, you know, I think is really interesting. And I think it's not, the whole discussion isn't just about West Ham, in my humble opinion. And again, this is just my opinion. For me, it's endemic of football now. As I said, I went through every Premier League match this season, and basically pulled out anyone who was an academy player who has been developed from the youth side into the first team. And in terms of players who have played at least 5 games in the Premier League this season, which out of 19 is I think, you know, a relatively competent squad player. So, you know, it's a integral squad player. The average is like two academy players. Obviously, we've got Deck and we've got Ben Johnson. The only exception being Chelsea, but that was almost like a hangover from the Lampard era, where it was almost by necessity rather than desire to play the kids because they couldn't buy anyone. And indeed, now they can buy people. They'd rather go out and spend £130 million on Enzo Fernandez rather than necessarily play Conor Gallagher, who's an England international and homegrown player, and don't even want to get rid of him. You know, rather than let him develop, they'd rather keep him. And he's going to be an absolute bit player for the rest of the season now. Same as Arsenal. Arsenal let Longelo go to Crystal Palace. They bought him Jorginho for 31, for 12 million quid. So it's not just West Ham. It's not just West Ham. But obviously on top of that, you look at the likes of Ashby, the likes of Longelo going. You know, you look at the likes of who else we got? Obviously Pierre, I'm not going to include. Obviously he left as well in this transfer window, and I'm not going to include Henry. Henry, where's Henry gone? Will Greenidge, because neither him or Pierre made a first team debut. In terms of this sort of discussion, but obviously Lacey went, and he's playing very well at Sunderland. His pathway, and for me, it's a bit like when you get a job. Sometimes you're in a job, and actually the people ahead of you maybe have been there for so long, you're not going to get promoted. So you actually move to another company to go higher up the food chain, and that's what these guys have done. You know, Alese knew that his pathway to the first team wasn't that easy, if at all. So it made more sense for him to go somewhere else, drop down a division. And I mean, it's not just a function of this regime. We go back to the 99 FA Cup youth winning side, you know, where you had the likes of Joe Cole. We beat Coventry 9-0 on aggregate. You know, out of that side, Joe Cole, Carrick, both made over 100 appearances for West Ham. Stephen Bywater made a fair few, and Richie Garcia made about 20 appearances. That was it. The captain, Izzy Ekipen, never got a first team sniff, had to drop down, had a long career at Swansea. You got the likes of Adam Newton, Bertie, some of these players, you got Angus, you got these players who had to drop down to find football. Some of them didn't even find first team football, in all honesty. And I think we've had guys like Lee Hodges on, we've had Sean Byrne on, guys who have broken into the first team, but knew it was going to be as a squad player, but they wanted first team football, so drop down a division. And I think this, and if you look at, for example, also, look at Sonny Perkins as well. His financial package was better at Leeds, so he went to Leeds, despite the fact he hasn't played the Premier League yet, despite that being his wish. He played in the Premier League when he was at West Ham and on less money. There's a motivation there. There's a motivation there, and by West Ham's press release of him leaving, that motivation was probably money. And again, there's a capping there, isn't it, in terms of our academy? And I agree with that. If someone's that good, then they're going to break into the first team, and then they go onto the first team wages, rather than if you've just made one appearance or you've come off the bench, and unless you make a considerable contribution to the first team, then you should be paid first team wages. That's the way I see it. But again, what do I know? So obviously, speaking about Sonny Perkins, Ashby, Longelo, in last season, the Europa League, we had this side where we had 5 academy players start in that dead rubber against Dinamo Zagreb. Now we only have Jamal Baptiste, but I don't know if we've got him. I don't know where he is. I haven't heard of him since. So that back 4, 3 of that back 4 have gone in the last year, and Sonny Perkins as well. And in fact, so's Yarmolenko, Alex Kroll, so's Nobles is retired. Vlasic is still hanging around at Torino on loan. Only 4 now, and Areola is still playing in the first team at West Ham. But regardless, that back 4, only one of them are still around. But you look at those players that have left, the youth team players, Ash Elise, Longelo, Perkins, these guys have come through from a very, very, very young age. And for me, that's where this has come from now. I do not see the academy now as a place for developing kids from a young age, from 10 all the way up, unfortunately. That's not the nature of West Ham. I don't think it's the nature of any academy now in the Premier League, in my humble opinion. But what it is now, there's definitely been a step change in the last few years. Going out and buying the best players from different leagues, young players. We've got the likes of Callum Marshall, who's absolutely smashing it for the youth team at the moment. Patrick Kelly as well. Both coming from Northern Ireland, both coming from the league. They played first team football already at Linfield and stuff, so they come in hardened already. You've got Luis Ao, for example, who's been a regular for Sao Paulo for a few years and playing, in the Brazilian league against the likes of the Corinthians and big derby matches. Talk about experience. For me, his pathway into the first team is a smoother pathway than Elise, for example. And some may agree and say it's a good thing, because maybe Luis Out will be a better player than Elise further down the line. We do not know. We don't know. I remember the outpouring we had when we sold Grady Diangana to West Brom for 19 million quid. Looks like an absolute fantastic deal now. Obviously, he played in the Premier League, when we sold him, but has since not really dug up any trees since then. We had Jeremy Ngakia, who out of the 16 players that Mark Noble, 16 players that David Moyes has given academy players first team debut since his second tenure, Ngakia was the only one that was in the Premier League, and that was with playing Liverpool of all people. So again, that was out of sheer necessity. We needed him in there. We were short at right back, and so he came in, playing arguably one of the best sides in the Premier League at the time. Played very well. We weren't offering again. Then he assumed we was going to offer him, first team money. He'd only made one appearance. His replacement was back from injury, and so his chances were going to be lessened. Particularly someone like Ben Johnson coming through the ranks as well. So for me, it definitely is. The academy is moving towards this sort of, rather than an academy, it's more of a development, and it's called development squad now. And that's what it is. It is a development squad. It's bringing in players who have got first team experience already. They know physically they've played against stronger, older players, experienced, more wily players. They've got that sort of game brain. Unless you're someone like, if you haven't gone out on loan, you could be easily playing the same, your age group, from 10 to 21, playing almost exactly against the same players if they were still at the same club. So where's the development there for them? There isn't a development there for them. And so, I think it's a function also of not just money, the Premier League, but a function of the way the youth setup is, that we're not getting them through. And even before, looking under previous regimes, you may only have one or two, break in. Rarely, sometimes we have 4 or 5. And it's usually a case of, again, necessity. So when we dropped into the Championship in the early 2000s, the likes of Bywater got more game time. The likes of Anton, Elliot Ward, they got more game time. But as soon as you went up, Elliot Ward, and we've had Anton on and I think we've had Elliot both on the channel talking about coming back up and why they stayed at West Ham. It was because, Pard said they were going to be playing first team football. What did they do? Went out and got Danny Gabardon and James Collins. And pretty much in one swift movement, took them both out the side. Well, definitely Elliot for sure. And again, if you look at the players who have made first team debuts at West Ham since over the last sort of 6 or 7 years, who are from the academy, who have since left, probably, you look through that list, you've got Manny, Harrison could end up playing Premier League football this season, or definitely in the next couple of seasons. Sonny Perkins, possibly. You got Dapu Olafane, he scored his debut, went to Bolton, was banging him for Bolton, has since moved to Sao Paulo, in the German league to try and get more first team football and develop his game. Elise could be playing the Premier League if Sunderland get promoted. Xander Silva went to Forest and then sort of that was it. Moved about a little bit. I think it was Olympiacos might have gone to as well, which made sense because Forest was owned by the Olympiacos owner as well. You got Grady. Tony Martinez, maybe we could look at saying that could be one that went away, one that got away in that. But again, it's taken him a while. He's had to go to various Spanish league and then he ended up at Porto and is playing consistently well for Porto. We've got Nathan Holland, Side Haksbadanovic, Celtic, Domingos Quino. I think Domingos has moved to Rotherham, or he was going to move to Rotherham with Connor Coventry and Jordan Hugel, Martin Samuelson, Josh Cullen. Again had to leave, had to go to the another league. Went to the Belgium league, played very well for Anderlecht, and has since because obviously Company went to Birmingham, he took Bournemouth. No, Burnley, that's the one. He became a B and Claret Blue. He took Josh with him, and hopefully Josh will be playing in the Premier League next year because I think Burnley will go up. Lewis Page around the Crawley, I think, or around the sort of the lower leagues. Reece Oxford had to go to several clubs in Germany before he found the one that suited him. Same as Blair Telga, Reece as well. Sebastian Leggett, fantastic career in the MLS. Anyone watching the Wrexham game would have saw Elliot Lee play for Wrexham. You've got Danny Potts and stuff like that as well. So out of that, I think actually there's only one player who's played in the Premier League. Maybe two, maybe Domingos. Let me have a quick check. I think Domingos may have played when he was playing at Watford. Let me have a quick just check while Domingos Quina. He may have played, so it may be two. Let me just check. Domingos as well. Sorry. So it's Grady and Domingos. And again, Domingos made 12 appearances in 18-19, and he made 8 appearances in the 19-20 and then that was it. So out of them, at the moment, when we say the ones that got away, it's only because of our perception of them at the moment. Elise is playing very well. He's playing very well on the Sunderland side. What happens when Sunderland go up? Will they maintain? The thing is, he's established now, but in the same way that Anton and Elliot Ward were established for West Ham. As soon as they went up, they went out and bought 2 players to replace them. In essence, I think for me, there's definitely there's a nostalgic view of the academy. I think people look at it with slightly tinted claret glasses. In my opinion, I think we do. We glamorise players. I myself included. I was a massive Ashby fan. Massive Ashby fan. Anton was a massive Elise fan, and I wish him all the well. Longelo, when he first played, I think it was against Hull or the Charlton game, didn't bring up any trees. Played very well in the Europa League game against Zagreb, but that was it. And because of that, I think we still have that view of in his head. He's playing very well for Birmingham, and hopefully he has a great career doing that. But I think there's got to be a bit of balance, and as much as I would love from a heart perspective to see players break through from the youth team who have been there since they were 10, there's something very West Ham, something nostalgic about that. Roy the Rovers stuff about that. But that's very rare now. Very, very rare. Ben Johnson, to some extent, is that player. Declan Rice, we brought him through, but still he signed when he was 14 from Chelsea. But still, his formative years, his development years were under West Ham. You look at someone now. We still got. Devine is a classic example. Starting to get a few minutes. Hopefully, you'll get a few more minutes. But then you're going to have Schumacher and Ings back in the first team, and you'd imagine his chances may be curtailed by that potentially, particularly with Antonio staying here. Maybe part of the idea of the Longelo deal to Birmingham was to increase the pathway of Ollie Scholes, for example, who we know the club look very highly at. Same with, those two are guys coming through the academy from a very young age. That alongside these sort of development players we're bringing in, the likes of Marshall, the likes of Kelly, the likes of Louise Howe, you can see how the team is. That you can see I can see what our strategy is now. It's about not necessarily bringing players from 10 years old onwards. You'll get one or two. You'll always get one or two in every age group who will get to some sort of level at West Ham. But it's bringing them in with these players as well. Someone like Louise Howe, and that could be one of the reasons why we never got a replacement for Craig Dawson. The whole Craig Dawson and Craig Dawson and Ashby transfers, while they were sort of pulled at last minute in the summer, was because we didn't have replacements for either. Now Ashby hasn't maybe at the time they thought Ashby maybe needed in the Premier League or in the first team squad. He hasn't really done that this season, and so it was, and maybe part of that was because his head was in this Newcastle move as well. With Craig Dawson, we haven't got a replacement. We haven't got a ready-made replacement. We've got Louise Howe, whose pathway is one less now because he hasn't got Craig Dawson to have to compete for a place in the West Ham lineup or in the West Ham matchday squad. Now, arguably, that place is could be his. We don't know. And again, hindsight's a great thing. And hindsight's a great thing with all of these. But I think out of the last batch of players that we've got rid of, none of them have bitten us on the arse just yet. But even if they do bite us on the arse 3, 4, 5 years down the line, that to me shows actually, we haven't got, unfortunately, you don't have time to do that now. Football is so a results business, and staying in the Premier League is critical for obviously for the club's success, for finances, for people's jobs, the tea ladies, all the catering staff and things like that. It's so important to keep the club in the Premier League that actually it's the detriment of developing the homegrown players. Now, unless there's a directive by. No, we do have the homegrown quota, but still, that's not particularly great. There's still loopholes. For me, unless you bring in a quota to say you need 2 players in the squad who have been since the age of 10, which they never would do, you're never going to get back to that nostalgic era, that Roy of the Rovers period where you've got 5, 6. You look back at some of the great sides of West Ham, like the 60s, that Brian Deere always tells me, that 65, that 65 squad, 65, 67 squad, I think 8 of them were boot boys or 9 of them were boot boys. And I think we have that in our mind as this utopian view, and that worked then, but now it doesn't work. It's not, and it's not the case of working. It's not how it operates. Football operates, and I think that's what I'm trying to get my head around. I think other people are trying to get their head around as well. And it's only when things like this happen, where you see lots of players leave quite rapidly, that you think, actually, I can understand why. I can understand it. I don't think it's. I think also, the fact is Moyes is a risk adverse manager rather than a risk taker, so he's less likely to throw players in. And when he does, they haven't worked really. So I look at Mipu or Beku, put him in the side, took him off again. It was totally like a rabbit in the headlights. And unfortunately, that may well have tainted his decision to do it elsewhere. But you look at the Derby game, you'd have brought on, maybe Mbappa, rather, a little bit earlier. But he brought him on with 15 minutes to spare, put himself about a bit. For me, he looks physically there to compete. And hopefully we'll get to see more of him. But anyway, let me know your thoughts. Bit of a different video from me today, but I was quite interested to get your opinions as well. From a, looking at it from above, let's take, rather than a heart, let's take it from a head, interested to get your opinions. And I know there'll be some people who don't agree with me, but there might be some people that agree with me as well. And again, it's just my opinion. It's not tainted by anyone. It's my view, and you'll have your opinion. And we like to have a bit of a conversation in the chat. We're getting Tony Carr back on soon. Tony Carr's coming back on probably next week. He's literally just texted me when I'm recording this, saying, when can we do that next part? He's just said, what's he said? Let me bring it up. It's on my thing. Where is it? It's on my WhatsApp. Tony Carr has WhatsApp. Happy to do part 2 over the weekend. Next week, maybe next week. Sorry, he's been in France. Lovely. So we'll get Tony on, and I think it'll be really. And I think personally that changing of the guard from an academy to a development squad, I think that's coincided with Tony Carr leaving. And it might be, and obviously Ricky Martin taking over, and obviously Kenny's taken over, and Kenny's now going to be made the academy manager officially soon, I believe. I think that could have been the start point of this change. I may be wrong, but just thinking about it and just seeing Tony's, it's just got me thinking time frame wise. But anyway, let me know what you think. As I said, we'll have Hammers headlines tonight. Don't know what I'm going to talk about. Talk about something. Take care. Stay safe. Stay warm. Stay humble. Let me know your thoughts. Be kind in the comments to everybody. Everyone's got their opinions, so let's face it all. I know we're all West Ham fans at heart, aren't we? And also, I'd like to thank all of our channel members, and also I'd like to thank all of our lovely, lovely channel sponsors as well. Much love. Bye bye.